I'm going to show you two photos here, both taken with my Shen Hao 6x17 panoramic view camera. Each photo displays a very specific defect, or flaw, that I see frequently coming from this camera. Now, as you look at each defect, see if you can figure out the source of the problem and maybe even how to go about fixing it. The first is this faint line going across the upper edge of the frame. It's always lighter, never darker than the areas around it, and it's always at the top of the frame, never the bottom. It also kind of seems to come and go randomly. In other words, I can't correlate it to any specific shooting situation or even any specific lens. But I will say it does seem to be most prominent with shorter focal lengths. The second issue has to do with vertical lines towards the left and right side of the image. You can see they bend inward, but not in a gentle curve like normal lens distortion. It's weirder than that. Like the lines are just kind of kinked inward, right around their midsection. And again, this distortion is most evident on my wide-angle lenses, the 90mm and 115. I'm aware of the limited appeal of this video. After all, how many people are really interested in this specific camera, let alone own it themselves? But don't change the channel just yet. This video isn't about the Shen Hao TFC 617A. I mean it is, but really it's more a cautionary tale about not being like me. In high school, one of my favorite teachers was Mr. Brenner. He had a unique teaching style, real good at cutting through BS. One day he went up to the whiteboard and quietly wrote a single word in big block letters. He then proceeded to draw 3 rectangles around those letters. This lesson obviously stuck with me, and it's a lesson that life has retaught me over and over again. When you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. But despite the impression this teacher left on me, and despite my near constant re-education on it, I am still an absolute champion at making assumptions. I make them all the time. And yes, it frequently bites me, well, in the ass. In fact, my world-class assuming kept these 2 image defects in my life for a decade. I bought this camera in 2014. I solved the line problem 9 years later. I figured out the distortion problem last week. Now, the distortion has bugged me for a very long time. But I knew what it was. It was lens distortion, obviously. I know what lens distortion looks like. Lots of wide-angle lenses have it. Nothing you can do about it. It's not like we got any fancy one-click distortion corrections for a Nikkor SW 90mm large format lens on a 6x17 negative. I haven't seen that option in Lightroom. So, it's just something I gotta live with. Or so I assumed. Until last week, when a viewer emailed me about it. He has the same camera, same lens, same distortion. I told him it's just the lens. Nothing you can do about it. Sorry, buddy. Then he whipped out his massive, throbbing intellect, laid it on the table in front of me and said, "But I don't see the distortion on the ground glass. So how could it be the lens?" And that's when I realized I never bothered to check the ground glass. It's all assumptions and Ace Ventura quotes up here, you understand? Not brain cells. As for the faint line at the top of the frame, I honestly didn't put much effort into solving it for those 9 years because, well, it was simple enough to clone out in Photoshop. Besides, I figured it was actually from my scanner. I thought it was some sort of reflection coming off the shiny black plastic film holder. I assumed there's no way it could be my $2,200 camera. It must be the crappy scanner. Now, anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together would have looked directly at the negative to see if the line was on the image itself. That would easily rule out the scanner and point the blame back at the camera. And had my second brain cell not been busy repeating Bumblebee Tuna over and over again, I might have thought to do that sooner than 9 years into it. You can probably guess. The line was there on the negative. So you see what assuming does? Even the simplest, most obvious, any idiot would think to check this kind of thing becomes like invisible. Mr. Brenner would be so disappointed in me. Take a look at the reflection of my window in the film plane. This line right here should be straight. So should this. Now watch what happens if I use a Vons Club card to put a little pressure on the negative. The distortion goes away. Distortion. No distortion. Distortion. No distortion. 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 No distortion. And of course, same on the other side. I put a little pressure on the film, and that line straightens out, more or less. So it's not the lenses. It's an unflat negative. Wonderful. If we look inside the film holder, you can see the film has to make a sharp 90-degree turn from the spool to the pressure plate. You can see, too, a couple of rollers there that are supposed to ease that turn, but they're just not big enough. As a result, the film can't lay perfectly flat. It kind of puckers up at the edges. That's what's making the lines get that weird kink. Now, as for the bright line at the top of the frame, pretend this flashlight is the lens projecting its image on the negative, and keep a real close eye along the edge of the image area, right against the pressure plate. If I keep the flashlight far away, all is well. That mimics a longer focal length lens. But watch what happens if I bring the flashlight closer to mimic a shorter focal length. Well, hey there, line. There you are. So this beveled edge is creating a reflection along the top edge of the photo. But why not the bottom? Well, the top of the photo is usually the brighter part of the image, at least for me, because that's where the sky is. The foreground just doesn't have enough light on it to create this reflection. So that beveled edge, another excellent design choice, Shen Hao. Well done. When I bought this camera in 2014, I paid $2,200. Now they're going for over $3,000, which is insane. Getting this camera was a big effing deal for me. That was and is a huge investment. But it was worth it. I love using this camera, and I've made many of my most important photos with it. In fact, I'd say it's become my most prized possession. My pride and joy, light of my life. Of all the cameras I own, it's the last one I'd ever get rid of, and the first thing I'd grab if my house was on fire. After my dogs and my wife. Which is why I find it so painful to have to admit out loud that the film holder for it sucks. Now, there's plenty to like about this film holder. Its all metal construction makes it rigid, tough, and just the right amount of heavy. It feels like a high quality piece of camera gear. You know, it feels expensive, which is appropriate because it is. And perhaps most important of all, the auditory feedback on this thing is top shelf. But all that doesn't matter in the face of these two utterly inexcusable design flaws. Now, to give you some quick camera history, the Shen Hao TFC 617A is basically a Chinese knockoff of an old Japanese camera, the Ebony 617. That camera used a film holder made by Horseman, another Japanese company. That holder, according to one user from a forum post way back in 2012, holds the film, quote, excruciatingly flat. Must be nice. And not surprising, given that everything Horseman made is excellent. Now, I have a Horseman 6x9 film holder here. You can see it has big, beefy rollers to ease the film onto the flat plane. Fun fact, by the way, you can see their old 6x17 holder was basically two of these 6x9 holders Frankenstein together. Kind of cool. I wish Shen Hao had just finished the plagiarism job and copied the Horseman film holder too, because this design is crap. You couldn't fit bigger rollers in there if you wanted to, and the spools are simply too close together for the film to lay flat on its own. Of course, I've searched high and low for one of those Horseman 6x17 holders in the hopes I could modify it to fit my Shen Hao. But they're about as rare as a 24 karat gold Leica at your local garage sale. And so I was forced to figure out my own solutions. The reflection off that beveled edge is an easy fix. I just bought a roll of flocking tape from Amazon, which is basically adhesive velvet. As far as tape goes, it's not super cheap at about 25 bucks, but it's kind of a good thing to have on hand anyway. It can even make for a decent light seal if you gotta repair a leak on an old camera. So I cut a narrow strip, secured it to that beveled edge, Bob's your uncle, problem solved. And it is solved. That line doesn't show up anymore. The film flatness problem was a tougher one to figure out. I needed help on that one. So I reached out to Evan at the Film Laundry. He built an incredibly impressive 3D printed version of the Shen Hao TFC 617. You should check out his website and YouTube channel for a rundown of the build. It's pretty freaking crazy. I was hoping he could adapt his 3D printed holder to work on my Shen Hao. So we went back and forth on several emails, brainstorming ideas. He was incredibly gracious and enthusiastic about helping me, but ultimately, I didn't need to take him up on it. Because one day, I was struck with an idea so brilliant, it'll surely go down in history right between Ben Franklin's kite experiment and Newton's falling apple. My brilliant idea? A pencil. A freaking pencil. The solution had been sitting in my desk all these years. Now, it's got to be a round number 2 pencil. Can't be a pencil that has the facets on it. But I cut it into 2 pieces, each measuring exactly 74 millimeters. Don't bother with a saw on this one. A razor blade will do it. With the film spooled up, it's a simple matter of sliding the pencils under the backing paper until they wedge just outside the pressure plate. They click right into place. It's like it was meant to hold them there. And then attaching the frame pushes the pencils perfectly against the film spool, creating a slightly more gradual curve around that 90-degree bend. They even roll a little bit when you advance the film. It's perfect. Now, initial analysis of that window reflection looked promising. Not perfectly flat, I'll give you that, but much better than before. All that was left to do was to run a test roll. Here's a shot from my 90mm lens without the pencils installed. And of course, there's that ugly distortion. Here it is with the pencils.
Holy shit, it worked!
I could look at this side by side all day. I can't believe it worked. It's so freaking satisfying. Here's another side by side, this time with the 115mm. Not as clear because I didn't stand in exactly the same spot, but you get it. Now, again, the correction isn't perfect. There's still a tiny, tiny bit of distortion, but it is massively improved. And for now, it's good enough for me. Now, I may eventually cut some metal rods to replace the pencils, and I'll need to keep an eye on any unexpected issues it may introduce to the film, like, I don't know, kinking or scratching or something, but overall, I'm freaking thrilled about this. Also kind of pissed, though, if I'm honest, that I didn't figure this out sooner. And it's kind of stupid that my $2,200 camera needed a 38-cent pencil to finally reach its full potential. There's no excuse for such an expensive camera to have such a poorly functioning film holder. So, I really hope Shen Hao fixes these design flaws someday. But I'm not going to assume they will. If you have a Shen Hao TFC, be sure to check back because I have a really exciting announcement coming up. My monthly contributors got a sneak peek in their latest VIP video, but I'll be sharing it soon here on YouTube.